After a moment of inaudible discussion with da Costa, the Master Reader lifted up his voice afresh. The Chief of the Elders frowned and clenched his praying shawl angrily. It was a fifth benediction, but the reader's sing-song went on, for Manasseh's wrath was nearer than the magnate's. "Who vows 5 livras for the captives for the life of the Chief of the Elders?" The Chief bit his lip furiously at this delicate revenge, galled almost to frenzy by the aggravating foreboding that the congregation would construe his message as a solicitation of the public attention. For it was of the amenities of the Synagogue for rich people to present these benedictions to one another. And so the endless stream of donations flowed on, provoking the hearers to fever pitch. The very orphan boys forgot that this prolongation of the service was retarding their breakfasts indefinitely. Every warden, dignitary, and official, from the president of the Mahamad down to the very keeper of the bath, was honoured by name in a special benediction. The chief of Manasseh's weekly patrons were repaid almost in kind on this unique and festive occasion. Most of the congregation kept count of the sum total, which was mounting. Suddenly there was confusion in the ladies' gallery, cries, a babble of tongues. The beadle hastened upwards to impose his authority. The rumour circulated that Mrs. da Costa had fainted and been carried away. It reached Manasseh's ears, but he did not move. He stood at his post, unfaltering, donating, blessing. "Who vows 5 livras for the life of his wife Sarah?" And a faint sardonic smile flitted across the beggar's face. The oldest worshipper wondered if the record would be broken. Manasseh's benefactions were approaching thrillingly near the highest total hitherto reached by any one man upon any one occasion. Every brain was troubled by surmises. The Chief of the Elders, fuming impotently, was not alone in apprehending a blasphemous mockery, but the bulk imagined that the Schnorrer had come into property, or had always been a man of substance, and was now taking this means of restoring to the Synagogue the funds he had drawn from it. And the fountain of benevolence played on. The record figure was reached and left in the rear. When at length the poor Master Reader, sick upon death of the oft-repeated formula, which might just as well have covered all the contributions the first time, though Manasseh had commanded each new benediction as though by an afterthought, was allowed to summon the Levite who succeeded Manasseh, the Synagogue had been enriched by £100. The last benediction had been coupled with the name of the poorest Schnorrer present, an assertion and glorification of Manasseh's own order that put the coping stone on this sensational memorial of the royal wedding. It was indeed a kingly munificence, a sovereign graciousness. Nay, before the service was over, Manasseh even begged the Chief of the Elders to permit a special rogation to be said for a sick person. The Chief, meanly snatching at this opportunity of reprisals, refused, till, learning that Manasseh alluded to the ailing president of the Mahamad, he collapsed ingloriously. But the real hero of the day was Yankele, who shone chiefly by reflected light, and yet shone even more brightly than the Spaniard, for to him was added the double lustre of the bridegroom and the stranger, and he was the cause and centre of the sensation. His eyes twinkled continuously throughout. The next day Manasseh fared forth to collect the £100. The day being Sunday, he looked to find most of his clients at home. He took Grobstock first, as being nearest, but the worthy speculator and East India director espied him from an upper window and escaped by a back door into Goodman's Fields, a prudent measure, seeing that the incredulous Manasseh ransacked the house in quest of him. Manasseh's manner was always a search warrant. The King consoled himself by paying his next visit to a person who could not possibly evade him, none other than the sick president of the Mahamad. He lived in Devonshire Square in solitary splendour. Him Manasseh bearded in his library, where the convalescent was sorting his collection of prints. The visitor had had himself announced as a gentleman on synagogual matters, and the public-spirited President had not refused himself to the business. But when he caught sight of Manasseh, his puffy features were distorted, he breathed painfully, and put his hand to his hip. "You!" he gasped.
"Have a care, my dear sir, have a care," said Manasseh anxiously as he seated himself. "You are still weak. To come to the point, for I would not care to distract too much a man indispensable to the community who has already felt the hand of the Almighty for his treatment of the poor." He saw that his words were having effect, for these preposterous pillars of the Synagogue were mightily superstitious under affliction, and he proceeded in gentler tones. "To come to the point, it is my duty to inform you, for I am the only man who is certain of it, that while you have been away our Synagogue has made a bad debt."
"A bad debt?"
An angry light leapt into the President's eyes. There had been an ancient practice of lending out the funds to members, and the President had always set his face against the survival of the policy.
"It would not have been made had I been there," he cried.
"No, indeed," admitted Manasseh. "You would have stopped it in its early stages. The chief of the elders tried, but failed."
"The dolt! A man without a backbone. How much is it?"
£100.
£100?
Echoed the President, seriously concerned at this blot upon his year of office.
"And who is the debtor?"
"I am."
"You? You have borrowed £100? You jackanapes!"
"Silence, sir! How dare you? I should leave this apartment at once, were it not that I cannot go without your apology. Never in my life have I borrowed £100. Nay, never have I borrowed 1 farthing. I am not a borrower. If you are a gentleman, you will apologize."
"I'm sorry if I misunderstood you,"
murmured the poor President.
But how then do you owe the money?"
"How then?" repeated Manasseh impatiently. "Cannot you understand that I have donated it to the Synagogue?"
The President stared at him open-mouthed.
"I vowed it yesterday in celebration of my daughter's marriage."
The President let a sigh of relief pass through his open mouth. He was even amused a little.
Oh, is that all? It was like your deuced effrontery. But still, the Synagogue doesn't lose anything. There's no harm done."
"What is it that you say?" inquired Manasseh sternly. "Do you mean to say I am not to pay this money?"
"How can you?"
"How can I? I come to you and others like you to pay it for me."
"Nonsense, nonsense,"
said the President, beginning to lose his temper again.
"We'll let it pass. There's no harm done."
"And this is the President of the Mahamad,"
soliloquized the Schnorrer in bitter astonishment.
"This is the chief of our ancient godly council. What, sir? Do you hold words spoken solemnly in Synagogue of no account? Would you have me break my solemn vow? Do you wish to bring the Synagogue institutions into contempt? Do you, a man already once stricken by heaven, invite its chastisement again?"
The President had grown pale. His brain was reeling.
"Nay, ask its forgiveness, sir,"
went on the King implacably.
"and make good this debt of mine in token of your remorse. As it is written, and repentance and prayer and charity avert the evil decree."
"Not a penny!"
cried the President, with a last gleam of lucidity, and strode furiously toward the bell-pull. Then he stood still, in sudden recollection of a similar scene in the council chamber.
"You need not trouble to ring for a stroke,"
said Manasseh grimly.
Then the